what's going on, Team Trek family? Welcome back. As promised in the studio, we are blessed to have Martin's wife, Katie Acosta, come in. I'm just going to go ahead and get right into it and let her kind of introduce herself a little bit and tell us a little bit more about her background so we all understand where she's coming from. So, Katie, thank you again for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I grew up in southern Indiana, just north of Louisville, Kentucky, in a small town called Clarksville. Spent my whole life there, went to school. Once I graduated high school, I went to a couple different colleges around town. I was a cheerleader in high school. Pretty much the only sport I had. Normal, typical student.
I see. And so I'm going to interrupt just real quick because I can see that you don't like to talk about yourself. So we're going to back up right now. So small town, what does that mean? Give me a roundabout number.
So my high school, there was about 400 students.
Oh, okay. Still a big amount of groups that you could have been a part of.
Mm-hmm.
And what were you?
I was just a cheerleader.
Okay, so you hung out with all the cheerleaders and all the jocks, would you say, or?
Yeah, a little bit of everybody, but our school was weird. Like it wasn't your typical like high school movie where like all the cheerleaders hung out together, all the jocks. Our school was more a lot of people. Everybody talked to everybody, I guess.
Okay, so what was a typical weekend after homecoming?
We hung out in our high school parking lot a lot.
Nice.
Everybody would drive their cars up there and just hang out in the parking lot.
Don't you miss those days when everyone was outside just gathering and just laughing, having a good time? I do too. We weren't much different. I was in Los Alamos, New Mexico, and we just went into the mountains a little further. Started a little bonfire, and everyone hung out and got along. So that's really cool. What was your family life back then?
My mom and dad were together up until I think 9th grade. They split. I lived with my dad the rest of high school, and then moved in with my mom later once I graduated.
Okay, so when they split, did they go separate ways to different states, different towns?
They both still lived in the same town, so it was nice. It was easy.
Okay, so you say you stayed with your father, but I assume you'd probably spend a lot of time still with your mother, even though you were living with your father.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so for the better or for the worse, everyone's doing pretty well.
Yeah, everybody's great. Everybody's good. My mom actually lives with us now, so.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Really cool how it all comes around. That's what I love about family.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. She helps us out a lot.
Okay, so you graduated high school. How'd you fare grades wise?
Grades wise, I guess an average student. A's, B's, and C's.
Okay.
Average, I guess.
Okay, so you were a popular cheerleader, average grades.
Mm-hmm.
Would you call yourself popular?
I don't like the word popular, but I guess I hung out with everybody.
The way that it was used back in our high school days, right? So would you say that you were one that would bring people into the fold, or were you one of the holders of you made the decisions on who got to be part of the groups?
Oh no, I wouldn't say that. I don't know. It was just a group of us that hung out for a long time. I was neighbors with some of the kids I hung out with, and we would go to each other's houses and hang out.
And then just someone would be having a party, so it's like everyone would just go.
We played cards a lot.
So you had your few really good friends, and then everyone just hung out together, though. Mm-hmm. That's really neat. A lot of people coming in and out of the town, or was it pretty much like only a couple students leaving and coming?
Only a couple of students leaving.
I ask that, growing up around military families now, right? You always see it 2 years, 3 years, and then the kids are getting moved to another school. And so I just like to get that aspect as well. Okay.
There wasn't much military around there. It wasn't, Fort Knox was the closest, but the kids weren't going to school where we were.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. What's college look like for you then?
I started out at it's Indiana University Southeast, and so it's just like a branch of Indiana University. I started out there, and then I went there for a year, and then moved over to the University of Louisville. Had a whole new set of friends over there in college. I didn't know what I wanted to do. That was my problem. The 2 years I was in college, I had no clue what I wanted to do. So I ended up dropping out, and I went to cosmetology school.
Okay.
So I got my cosmetology license, and I was a hairdresser for about 10 years.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
So when you were in school, were you just going for general studies or okay?
Yeah. I always had an interest in psychology or nursing.
Okay.
But I never could fully make up my mind if that's actually what I wanted to do.
Okay, so what was it then about cosmetology that stuck?
It was just simple. It wasn't the pressure of college. It was a school. You got to do this many hours. When you're done, you get your license, you take your tests, and then you go start working. So
nice, and then you get to spend the rest of the time building on your skills and of course
making money.
Absolutely. No, that's again, people are always asking me. I seem to get asked a lot of questions by kids around that age where it's college level and they're making those decisions, and I've heard a couple of them talk about cosmetology, so I think this will be interesting for some of them. So that's awesome. So college, you said you finished that. How old were you at that point?
When I dropped out?
Yeah, when you dropped out and then you went into your cosmetology?
Maybe 20.
Okay, so at the age of 20, now you're a cosmetologist and you're still living with your father at this point?
No, so when I was in college, I moved out on my own. And then all through cosmetology school, I was on my own. I lived on my own. So I was away from parents. I lived over in Louisville, Kentucky, which isn't that far from where I grew up. It's maybe 30 minutes from where I grew up. But I lived on my own, went to cosmetology school. Somebody I went to cosmetology school with had her own salon. So while I was in school, she brought me on as a receptionist. And eventually, once I graduated, I did hair there.
Well, that's nice. Getting to at least doing the receptionist job. And I'm a big fan of this, right? You take a job like that where you are around it every day. You get a better idea of, do I want to specialize in that? Is this really what I want to do? And so I'm a big fan of that. I was talking to one of my cousins about that just recently. So, okay. So what town was that again? I'm sorry.
Louisville, Kentucky.
So how far away is that from your hometown then?
About 30 minutes. It's just across the river.
Now, is that a bigger town than where you were?
Yeah, it's a pretty big city.
Okay. So how is that? So now you're living on your own, or were you roommates?
I had a roommate. I had a roommate for a little while, and then I lived on my own for a big portion of it.
Okay. Now, how was that adjustment for you?
I loved living on my own. I loved it. I love having my own space. I loved it. Mm-hmm.
And as far as the pressures of bills, anything like that, just...
I was always good. It never worried me. Somehow, if I felt like I wasn't going to make a bill, somehow I did. Which doing hair, tips is always nice. Tips always helped me a lot during that time.
Okay. I know it seems like in our time where we're at now, kids are a little bit more hesitant to take those leaps and go out on their own, to really get too far from home. And you were 30 minutes away, so you knew you had a place to fall back to. And I think that's a really important point. One of the guys brought it up that kids, if they know they have a place to fall back on, they're more successful than if you just kick them out and say, you're on your own, dude, you're 18, go. So that...
There was a time at one point that I moved back in with my mom for a little bit just to pay off credit cards and stuff. Eventually, I moved back out on my own again, but it was nice. It was definitely nice having that, knowing I could always go back home if I needed to.
No, I agree. So, for those parents that are watching, I mean, it makes a big difference. It really does. Okay, so cosmetologist, you said you've been doing that now for 10 years. At what point did you and Martin meet?
Um, so the salon I worked at was a all men's salon. We had massages and manicures, pedicures, haircuts, all for men. Um, One of the girls I went to hair school with, she got a job at my salon as well. So we worked together for a little bit. Her husband, at the time it was her boyfriend, maybe fiance, worked with Martin. And it was New Year's Eve. He came into town with his friend, which was her boyfriend, fiance. I can't remember what they were at the time, but and I met through them.
Okay, so how was that? Was it love at first sight?
So it was New Year's Eve. We all met up at a restaurant. So technically, I met him at a restaurant before we went out, but then we all went out to the bars and the clubs and hanging out. And it was fun. We got along. We got along really well that night. Okay, let me back up. So driving home that night, my friend, her, let's say fiance, me and Martin he was driving me home to my apartment. We said goodbye. The next morning, he found me on Facebook and was messaging me, let's go to the movies, and I'm like, I don't know this guy. So I didn't. I was like, no. A few months later, when that couple got married, we met back up again, and that's pretty much that's when we hit it off real good.
Okay, so you basically planted the seed a little bit, let it mature. 2 months later, met again, and it was like, okay, this guy's not just trying to, I got you. That's really cool.
And between those 2 months, he was in the Q course. He was still in the Q course when we met. So I believe he was at Robin Sage during that time. And so he didn't have any contact for a while, and I'm like, what happened to him? So that kind of put a little ding in me too, that I was thinking about him when he wasn't texting me.
That's awesome. That's really cool. So you got to skip a lot of the Q course then. So if he was finishing Sage when you guys met, I assume he passed. I think he said he went right through. So yeah, he's a beast. Okay, so if Robin Sage was done, all he had left was language. He was already a Spanish speaker though, right? So how quick was that then? Because he's telling you, hey, I like you, but I'm going to Florida, like quick.
So where I am from, North Carolina, Fort Bragg, is about the same amount of time as down here is travel-wise. They're both about
10 hours.
Yeah, about 10 hours. So it was about the same. But he was moving to Florida. I was kind of jealous. And I'm like, dang, I love Florida. So I was excited to come visit him, though, when he moved down here.
Okay, so that's easy enough. He gets out here. Did he deploy right away, or?
No, I don't believe so. Anyways, we dated about 2 years before I moved down here.
Okay.
He deployed once within that time.
Okay.
So I can't remember exactly when his first deployment was. I know it was to Afghanistan, but it was once before I moved down.
What did you know about his job?
I didn't exactly know what a Green Beret was. I knew he was in the Army. I was doing hair, and of course, it was a men's salon, so talking to guys about this new guy I met. And like, oh, he's in the Army. Yeah, he's a Green Beret. And they're like, wait, what? And I'm like, what? Like, I had no idea what that meant or anything. Which, my dad was in the Army, but he wasn't to that level.
Okay. Did you speak to your dad about Martin beforehand?
Mm-hmm.
And what were his thoughts on what you were getting into?
He was not happy when I moved down to Florida. But that's just being a dad, protective, you know.
Okay. What about as far as the job?
He loves Martin. He thinks he's awesome. He loves him.
Okay. A lot of I ask because, a lot of fathers, they consider that it's like, okay, you're marrying a man that's a Green Beret. You know what that means, right? He's going to be gone a lot. He's probably going to be focused on himself a lot and his team a lot. And it's a lot to take. I mean, being a military spouse and on its own it's a hard job. There's no doubt. It's by far a lot harder than our job is. And there's there's a ton of spouses out there that are watching this right now, and hopefully they're getting that kind of respect that they're deserving for it. I mean, you hear it during retirement speeches all the time. My wife is, she's my rock. She's the one that deserves to be up here. She's the one that got me up here. But I think retirement speeches are too far and few between, and wives really want to know what you have to say. They want you to, be able to kind of speak for them on what they're dealing with, I think. So they're all looking forward to hearing this. So I didn't want to, sorry, I kind of probably skipped forward a few scenes of where we were from, but I know that there's a lot of people that are going to be listening that are happy to finally have you on here and have a female's perspective of it. So when we do talk about this stuff, please, let's get a little bit in the weeds on it. All right. So where were we? What do you know about a Green Beret?
What do you know about a Green Beret? Yeah, I didn't know much about it. I did not know how much they were gone. And I just kind of took a leap.
I love that.
Which, talking about when I moved out on my own, you can always go back. I thought the same when I moved down to Florida. I can always go back home if it doesn't work out.
So important, right? So important.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you take that leap of faith, you move out here. It's been 2 years you've been dating. He's deployed once. What kind of guy is Martin?
What kind of guy is Martin?
At this time, you're in your honeymoon phases. You haven't been married yet, right? So you're still in that dating world, and you didn't have any children prior, and he didn't have any children prior, right? So how is he in your eyes? How are you picturing this big, tall, beautiful beast?
I was 27 at the time, I believe, when I moved down here. It was a whirlwind. It was a whirlwind. I was learning as I went.
Where were you living?
Fort Walton.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. When I moved down, he had just bought a house in Fort Walton, and I moved in with him. I brought all of my furniture and everything from living on my own, and that's pretty much what we put in the house.
That's awesome. Okay, so are you getting involved with any of the FRGs, any of the team wives, anything like that?
I knew some of the team wives, but I wasn't super active. I was never super active with the military, really.
Okay.
I got a job down here. So that's what I was used to, was working, and I went to work pretty much as soon as I moved down here.
So you learned a lot about the military by talking to your dad, talking to your customers, and then of course you married Martin, and you're learning as you go, which is, I think, the same for most of us. I didn't come from a military background. I had no idea what I was getting into, and it was kind of like, if you're going to be with me, you're along for the ride, and we're just going to see where this runs to. So those leaps of faith are not easy to take. Military members, we have to, right? That's what we do. So our spouses get to ride that same whirlwind. And once we're going, right? It's like we signed the dotted line, but you guys have to ultimately carry the load, carry the water while we're out doing what we're doing. So again, can't thank y'all enough, and for what you all do. Okay, so marriage. Tell me about the proposal.
So when I moved down, he deployed maybe a couple months after I moved down here.
Afghanistan again, or?
Yeah. So I was by myself, 10 hours away from family. So all I could do was work. So I worked cutting hair. Once he got back from that deployment, let me think. Let me go through the time in my head. So right before he deployed on that deployment, we got married. It was on a whim. He was in a school. We had kind of talked about it before, and we were like, you know what, let's just do it. And he was in a school at the time and had the weekend off, so we drove back down and we went to the courthouse.
So you went back to your hometown?
No, here. Oh, in Fort Walton.
Really? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So when was that exactly?
That was right after I had moved down.
What year?
So I moved down in July 4th weekend of 2014, and we got married August 15th of 2014.
Okay, so you're coming up into 10 years now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so courthouse wedding, I think a lot of people at home understand how those go. So, yep, we're all on board. We've kind of been there, done that. Now, where are we going?
He deployed right after that. Right after that, he deployed back to Afghanistan. I spent my time just working while he was gone.
Where's your head at when you know that he's in Afghanistan? Because he's such a humble guy, I have to assume that you just kind of figured he wasn't in too much danger. Like things were pretty chill.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. He never really led on what they were actually doing or how dangerous it was over there or anything like that.
Yeah, that kind of goes back to how do we tell our wives these stories?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So the guys that sit on that couch that tell me their stories and tell them to the world, it's like the reason we're doing that is because we can't tell that story to our wives, but somehow we're hoping that they'll better understand us, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, he's a humble guy. Okay, so he's on his second deployment, as far as you know. He's just eating food and working out and growing a big old beard.
Yeah. Long hair. He came back from that deployment with long hair.
I don't know why we do that. We look horrible. Okay, so he's back from that deployment. How is he? How's his mental health and how's his it's the first year of marriage. Where are you guys at?
So every time he came back from deployments, especially the Afghanistan deployments, I noticed how observant he was. We'd be in Walmart and he'd be, like paying attention to everything.
Okay.
So I noticed that a lot.
A little bit of hypervigilance coming back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which it faded eventually. It would fade. It wouldn't be as bad a couple months after, but I feel like all you guys are kind of like that to an extent.
With us not being real doctors or anything, we tend to gauge our mental health off of each other, and I would agree with you. We do tend to have that as one of the tendencies coming back, which I think for most people it's understandable. You were in a position where, yeah, absolutely. So, okay. So besides the stuff at Walmart, how's everything?
Everything was good. It was really good. I got pregnant shortly after, with our first. I had him in June of 2016. Pretty quickly got pregnant with our second. I got pregnant with our second when our first was 6 months old. So, they're 15 months apart.
Okay.
Once I had the babies, I was busy with the babies all the time.
Of course, that's a huge change in your operation tempo, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're at what? You got married at 14 in 2014, excuse me. So 3 years later, you've got two babies. You've got a 6-month-old, or I'm sorry, you've got a newborn and you've got a 6-month-old.
A 1.5.
Or I'm sorry, a 1.5-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
So double stroller everywhere you're going, right? We've seen that walking around the PX, trying to push a shopping cart because your husband's deployed, and you are not happy looking people when we see that.
Yeah.
So tell us about that. You're You're basically a single mother. How is how's the community as far as the unit and stuff? Are you getting are you talking to any of the other wives, getting any kind of support there? You said you didn't really reach out much, so
the other wives helped me a lot. The unit not so much. I didn't really reach out to them very much. But the other wives definitely, the team wives specifically, helped out a lot.
and that's more along the lines of what I meant. It's people from the unit. A lot of times the FRGs are the FRGs, but then you'll have the break off groups, like the team wives are generally talking about stuff. So did you feel like you were navigating it pretty well by yourself?
I think I did.
Okay.
Yeah, I've always been pretty independent, so I took it with no fear, I guess.
I don't understand it. There's probably not a man out there that could understand it, but how you are able to do those things, we're just not built the same. With my boys, it's real simple. You just throw stuff at them, and that's how you raise boys if you're a man, right? And y'all, it's absolutely 20 plus hours a day that you're working, and you have a baby under one arm. You're cleaning as you go. It's crazy to see what y'all are capable of and what y'all put up with and deal with, and without any kind of outlets potentially to people to talk to, friends to deal with, that stuff starts to build. So you're basically 3 years into your marriage now, and he's deployed once and probably going back again pretty shortly.
He deployed pretty much every year.
Okay.
I believe every year.
So the first one while married was Afghanistan, and then after that down south?
Once I had our first one, he went 5 weeks after I had him, he went down south.
5 weeks?
Yeah.
So you're still healing.
Mm-hmm.
And you're saying, all right, bye, I love you, I got this.
And then he got back from that deployment, got pregnant again with the second one. Left about 5 weeks after I had him too.
Wow. It's unbelievable.
He actually, okay, back up, I was wrong on that. He was gone while I was pregnant with him and almost didn't make it to his birth. That was that one.
You guys are so strong.
He was on the phone with me, and I was like, I don't know if I can make it. Like, I'm having contractions really bad. I was crying on the phone to him, and his team sergeant happened to hear me and sent him home early, and I had the baby a couple of days after I got home. See,
good leadership right there. Right on. So that's one thing that I refused to do, right? It was miss a birth of my child, and sometimes they just don't have that opportunity to make that call, right? So I'm happy that to hear that he was there. So, okay. Talk me through the infancies and how was he as a new father?
He was great. Amazing. He's amazing with babies. Awesome. He didn't get much of the baby time, unfortunately, because he was gone so often, but awesome with babies.
So with him deploying every year, he's home for, a month before they turn around to go back out to train more to get ready for the next trip. So in a given year, you're probably really only getting 5-6 months with him.
2 months, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's tough. That's one thing that I think a lot of people don't understand, how much you all deal with when they hear about military spouse, and it's like, oh, I got it, your husband deployed once or twice. No, you don't understand. I did all of this by myself, and then when we do come home, we ask you guys to take care of us too. So yeah, I applaud you for being so strong. So now after the second birth, you guys stayed in that same house in Fort Walton, or did you guys already move?
Right before I had our second, we had moved to Crestview.
You'd moved already. Okay. So how's that? Now you have to move with little kids and very pregnant. The whole 1-year-old. The whole thing. So Martin was home for that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
How was that? The team help out?
Mm-hmm.
See, isn't it cool?
Every time we've moved, there's like 30 guys there, and
they break a lot of stuff.
Thankfully, no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that part. Just the way teams work together. In SF, it's really cool. I mean, you really do feel like you're part of a family, and that's we talk about that a lot. That's one of the things that we miss the most when we leave, and it feels like you're leaving a part of yourself. But okay, so try not to get emotional about my team time. All right, so. Going into so every time he comes home from a deployment, just status quo. Any real changes? You said a little bit of hypervigilance there at the beginning,
some hypervigilance. He always drinking a lot. The drinking. Looking back, I feel like it got worse the more deployments, the worse his drinking got. In the beginning, before I had the babies, I was drinking too because I was in my 20s, Mm. But looking back, I feel like after every deployment, it got worse. The drinking.
Okay, so before his last deployment, was it a summer deployment, winter deployment?
His last deployment.
Because he left, I think he said he was there just how long was he there before the incident?
Not quite a month.
That's right. So leading up into it, a lot of train up going in. So the summer prior, what was that like? Were you guys vacationing at all?
No. No. The summer prior.
See, I think 2019, right?
Yeah. It was just normal. I had a 3-year-old and a 2-year-old, so normal, babies, toddlers running around.
Okay.
The deployment before, we fought a lot. Before his last deployment, I was over it, done with all the leaving, and I just had a bad feeling.
Really? Now you feel like you have that ability a little bit too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which a lot of people did, from what I've heard from other people.
Yeah,
a lot of people had a bad feeling before that deployment.
Okay, so how was so he leaves, regular goodbyes, everything's happy. Kids are not really able to say goodbye too much. They're very young at that point still. So walk me through how you heard about everything.
So he had told me, hey, he was pretty good about being like, hey, we're not going to talk for a couple days. He wouldn't give me any details, but just so I wasn't waiting around. Our church had a festival that day. I can't remember what for, but a festival I went to with one of the other team wives. We were at the festival all day. We left, and she, maybe an hour later, she sent me a text message, and it was a screenshot of something from Facebook. She's like, hey, is this our guys? And it was.
Okay.
So that's how I knew. And then I spent the time waiting, just waiting to hear.
So what was the screenshot?
Something about, I can't remember exactly, but something about casualties in Afghanistan.
Okay. So what's going on?
It was an article on Self-Rep.
And that's how you were notified. So what's going on in your mind?
I started making phone calls trying to find out.
Okay, who are you calling?
I called one of our close friends. Martin is friends with her husband. And she dropped everything and drove to our house immediately. Somehow she had found out that Martin was hurt, but he was alive and he was in surgery.
She found that out.
Mm-hmm. She found that out for me.
Okay. Do you know how that was just through her network?
Mm-hmm. Through her network.
No notification from anything official yet? Okay.
Nope.
So how What's the flash to bang time on that? So you get the screenshot of the article.
It was around 1 or 2 o'clock in the day.
Okay.
I contacted somebody else I knew was involved with the FRG, trying to get info from her. I had a lot of people trying to reach out to figure out what was going on. Eventually, I found out he was okay. He's in surgery. Okay, I guess. He's in surgery. He's alive. So then it's just waiting to hear. Probably around 6 o'clock at night is when I finally got a phone call, but that wasn't even the official phone call. That was just from his old captain that called me.
Okay, so you're hearing through back channels that Martin is alive and he's in surgery.
Yep.
Now, is that true? Is that what was happening?
Mm-hmm. I believe so. I believe he was in surgery at that time.
Okay, so good to know.
They did not tell me. I feel like when the official call came in and everybody, they told me they did not let me know how bad it was or anything. I thought it was not near as bad as it was.
It sounds like there was a lot of confusion on a lot of the crew's parts, just what was going on, listening to Martin explain it.
Mm-hmm. He came through as a KIA at first. Our friend that rushed over to our house had found that out at first. Thankfully, before she got to our house, she found out the truth, so I didn't have to hear that. But
that's that would have been a completely different thing to deal with, mm-hmm. Right? Okay, so you're playing the waiting game. 6 hours later, you said roughly you get the unofficial official call, at least from somebody in a position on the team that can give you some details. What do you know about the extent of his injuries and what they were? Do you know their gunshot wounds? Do you know anything about them?
So the guy who called me had been a captain from an old team of his. He told me that everything was okay. He had an injury to his hip, his leg, and then more information would come, pretty much. When I got the official phone call, it was probably a couple hours after that. And I was being told the whole time somebody was going to show up at my house. So I'm waiting. Do I put the kids to bed? Do I, nobody ever showed up to my house. The official phone call that I got, he told me some injuries that were not accurate. He acted like everything was fine. It was fine. Very vague.
Okay.
Eventually, over the next week, they had me getting my stuff together to go to Germany. Did not lead me to that anything bad was coming out of that, and I was just maybe he wasn't going to be able to fly to the States. Is pretty much what they were telling me.
Okay, so that's making sense then. You're just kind of waiting. He's in surgery. He's got a hip injury, but now you're a couple days down the road and you still haven't heard from him. Mm-hmm. And they're telling you should probably get your stuff ready to move. You got to be thinking there's more to the story that they're not telling you.
One of the team wives found out from her husband that he was in a coma. And I was like, oh, well, that's why I haven't got a phone call from him or anything. So nobody had told me that.
Wow. Okay. Okay, so now how long before you fly?
So I found out that he was going to be able to go to Walter Reed. The day before he left Germany, I believe, is when they woke him up. I got a quick phone call. He couldn't really talk because they had just pulled the tube out of his throat. But that phone call was worth everything to me.
Oh my, I can't imagine.